Buenos días. Gracias por acompañarnos y bienvenidas y bienvenidos a todos. Una vez más estamos en nuestras actividades relacionadas al Premio Actitud de la Fundación Everis, el cual este próximo sábado 24 de octubre cierra su convocatoria y cuya ceremonia de premiación será el próximo 12 de noviembre. Como algunos de ustedes ya saben, el Premio Actitud es parte de una de las iniciativas de la Fundación Everis que nació el año 2001. La Fundación Everis posee más de 11 sedes a lo largo del mundo, con focos de trabajo en emprendimiento con base a tecnología, la innovación, trabajar con los niños para el desarrollo de habilidades STEM, mentoría con niñas a través de su programa Pulsar, que une a mujeres directoras y a niñas de escasos recursos, actividades de intraemprendimiento que tenemos para nuestros colaboradores y así un sinfín de actividades e iniciativas que buscan devolverle a la sociedad los talentos que hemos recibido de ella. Gracias a esta iniciativa es que hoy podemos disfrutar de una conversación diferente, con una tremenda invitada. Ella es médico, ingeniera, que trabaja en el MIT y en el cual está haciendo hoy su doctorado. Ha sido parte de iniciativas para trabajar en actividades en Latinoamérica, apoyando la difusión y el rol de las mujeres en la sociedad y en la innovación. Hoy participará en este conversatorio del Premio Actitud porque le hemos contado nuestra mirada para aportar con un pequeño grano de arena en el ecosistema de la innovación, que los emprendimientos con base digital poseen la particularidad que no reconocen género, edad, idiosincrasia, cultura, país y un sinfín de adjetivos y características que les podría mencionar, pero ninguno es relevante porque concursos como el Premio Actitud lo que buscan es ser una plataforma para apoyar a nuestros emprendedores con base tecnológica y crear nuevos espacios de conversación donde sus emprendimientos tengan mayor visibilidad, donde podamos fortalecer el ecosistema a través de organizaciones, la academia, los estudiantes, las incubadoras. Creemos que solo así, en momentos como el que hoy vivimos, serán resueltos satisfactoriamente y positivamente porque son ellos una gran respuesta a las problemáticas del día a día que se presentan y que pueden mejorar la calidad de vida de las personas. Para conversar conmigo nos acompañan hoy día Amanda Gelumbauskas, directora ejecutiva de la Fundación Everis de Brasil.
Olá, bom dia. Muchas gracias por invitarme, por participar en este evento. Estoy muy contenta, Pedro Pablo, de participar en especial porque esta es una edición especial de los premios en Brasil, el Premio Emprenda Salud, en nuestra sexta versión del concurso, con más de 900 proyectos evaluados en los últimos años a lo largo de 6 temáticas. Y este año nuestro foco ha estado puesto como fundación en reajustar nuestras categorías, apoyando el emprendimiento en esta nueva realidad. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Amanda, y además con tu potencia vamos a poder sacarle el jugo a nuestra invitada de hoy. Así que muchas gracias por estar con nosotros. Y también participa nuestra directora de la Fundación Everis en Chile, Angie Machmar, a quien también agradezco su participación. El silencio.
Bienvenidos todos, gracias por acompañarnos hoy en este tremendo evento con la invitada que hemos podido tener hoy para nuestros emprendedores, para hablar de innovación, con foco en nuestro premio que busca destacar aquellas innovaciones que nos permitan mejorar la vida de las personas. El Premio Actitud, a lo largo de los últimos años, nosotros estamos en nuestra 5ª versión, hemos tenido más de 600 proyectos, de los cuales hemos podido destacar como finalistas y ha llegado a España más de 5, y por lo tanto queremos que hoy este evento que está dedicado a todos ustedes puedan disfrutarlo y de primera mano escuchar a través de Aditi y de sus palabras cómo es vivir la innovación, cómo es vivir el emprendimiento en uno de los centros más importantes del mundo como lo es MIT.
Y ahora también quiero saludar con mucho honor realmente y muy agradecido a nuestra gran invitada, Aditi Gupta.
My name is Aditi Gupta. I am a fourth-year PhD student in the Health Sciences and Technology program at MIT, and I work with Leah Sterling on human exosystem adaptation.
I'm Professor Leah Sterling, and I look at how wearable technology affects human performance, both physical and cognitive.
A lot of my research is done in the Strive Center because they have this really cool 360-degree immersive virtual reality dome that is highly instrumented. You can get a lot of biomechanical data from it, and there's also a Vicon system that allows you to recreate emotions that happened inside the system after the fact in a computer setting.
What you're trying to assess is how much attention or how much unconscious focus does it take for them to actually wear the exoskeletons.
And ultimately the goal of that is to understand how we can make them more intuitive and more human-centered focus.
How quickly do they respond to stimuli when they're wearing the exoskeleton and then when they're not wearing the exoskeleton? By looking at those differences in response times, we can see an estimate of how much attention is on using the exoskeleton.
We need to be able to have it be useful in a real-world setting, whether that's in medicine or military or rehabilitation or whatever it is. You really have to focus on humans as well as the technology.
For these wearable systems that we're trying to make, how can we make any system that's supposed to help you on the physical side also not affect your cognitive performance?
I thought I wanted to be a doctor. Then I took a physics class and it was a blast. I decided I wanted to do something that had a mix of both medicine and physics. And that's kind of how I ended up in bioengineering, which was perfect because it gave me that opportunity to both learn about the human body and biology and how it works, but also apply that knowledge in a very creative and practical way.
Aditi, para nosotros es un gran agrado tenerte hoy aquí y la verdad que sin mucho más demora me gustaría dejarte con el escenario a ti para que puedas contarnos sobre tu experiencia, sobre tu conocimiento y sobre lo que estás haciendo hoy día. Muchas gracias por participar en este evento de hoy día.
Sorry, my mic was on mute. Thank you so much for having me here today. It is an honor and a pleasure to be talking to you all here today. So you've heard a little bit about the research that I've been doing for the past 5 years at MIT. It has been a really amazing experience. I've learned a lot about medical engineering and how to apply technical knowledge to people problems. As a medical engineer, my goal was really to understand how medical technology from a human-centered perspective, meaning that we can approach the design and implementation of medical technologies by first thinking about how a human will interact with it and how we can make it safe, effective, and pleasant for a person to use. An idea that is integral to a human-centric approach to technology is that everyone is different. We all use and interact with technology in different ways, but more importantly than that, we all interact with the world and think in unique ways. And that diversity needs to be incorporated into the design of technologies, companies, universities, and society as a whole. My background is in bioengineering and medical engineering. I've done a lot of work related to drug discovery, tissue engineering, and human biomechanics. Most recently, I became interested of the intersection between medicine, engineering, and technology. I came to MIT to pursue a degree because my program provided the opportunity to not only learn engineering and technology, but also to learn how these things intersect with human health. I've been very lucky because I've had the opportunity to apply my engineering and technical skills in a way that I hope will improve human health in a very real and tangible way. While the research being done at academic institutions is vitally important, I believe it is equally as important to take that knowledge and translate it into real-world medical and technological products that help people and impact people's lives. While academia tries to translate research into real products, which is something that MIT boasts and has a pretty good track record for, I believe that it is essential for academia to collaborate with industry to have a real-world impact. That may look like collaborating with already well-established companies or creating startups that can take a novel technology and contextualize it in a way that solves a real societal problem, whether that's human health or something else. As a woman in technology, it can be hard to find communities and groups that are open and where I can truly be myself. I have been extremely lucky in the last 5 years to have worked with an amazing, diverse group of people to push forward this exoskeleton research. My advisor is an amazing female role model. You saw her in the video, Leah Sterling. And I've been able to look up to her and my colleagues in the lab, who are also very diverse. Our lab is almost half women, and many other people in my lab are minorities who have had very different experiences in the world. I've been able to learn so much from them, not just about their lives and how they move through the world, but they have amazing perspectives on technology and engineering that I never would have been exposed to otherwise. I have learned just as much from my colleagues as I have from classes and from my advisors. In fact, it is because of this diverse team that I felt comfortable when it came time to start actually running our studies and bringing in people as subjects that I could push to make sure that at least half of our subjects were women. Oftentimes, research in engineering and technology is not equitable and that men are very much overrepresented. To change that, it takes every single one of us. We each have to proactively be thinking about what we can do in both small and large ways to change the power dynamic and societal imbalance. The exoskeleton research you saw in that video is only one part of the work that I've been doing in the last 5 years at MIT. I've also spent the last 5 years working diligently to improve issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion at MIT across the School of Engineering. MIT has, as a whole, is only about 20% women, and there are very few minorities at the student and leadership levels. A large portion of the work that we have been doing is making sure that MIT is welcoming and inclusive, not only for women, but for minorities and all underrepresented populations. This includes making sure that we are putting in the effort and the resources and the money required to find women, minorities, socioeconomically disadvantaged people, and other represented and underrepresented and marginalized groups and bring them into MIT. However, we can't just bring them in and call it a success. Diversity is only one part of the equation. We also have to make sure that once people from different groups come to MIT, or to a company, or to a startup, or to whatever group that we're talking about, they feel welcome, they feel included, and they have the same opportunity to advance as the most privileged in that group. Considering these intersectional aspects of diversity is important, not only in academia, as I mentioned, but also in technology companies and society as a whole. I'd like to tell you a story about an inspiring leader that I met a few years ago. So, as was mentioned, I have run a few entrepreneurship workshops around the world in Chile and Colombia and India and in Thailand. I was organizing this entrepreneurship competition in India 4 years ago, and we had a keynote speaker at the closing of the conference who was an MIT alumnus named Shrikant Bola. He was the first international blind student at MIT. As a young blind student in India, he had to fight for everything he has ever accomplished. He is the reason that blind students can now study engineering and attend the Indian Institute of Technology, the best engineering school in India. Before Shrikant Bola, all blind students were banned from studying engineering due to the incorrect idea that blind people could not succeed at that level. When he graduated from MIT, he returned to India and started a business. His business manufactures eco-friendly products and employs hundreds of disabled people all across India. His business has had a huge positive social impact, both for sustainability and in uplifting disabled people. Not only that, but his company is now worth over $20 million US. He is proof that differences in experience can lead to, and in fact are essential for success. Therefore, it is important that people with all different identities, whether as a woman, as a minority, as a disabled person, or someone who is economically disadvantaged or otherwise, must be considered to ensure that society becomes a more equal place. Part of the reason that we're all here today is the COVID-19 pandemic that has completely changed the world and the way that we live today. I assume many of the projects that people in the Everis Foundation are working on and that are applying to this competition are related to COVID-19, whether they focus on healthcare or building the economy or solving one of the other huge problems that COVID-19 has made worse. The pandemic has greatly affected every single person, but it has a disproportionate impact on very specific disadvantaged groups. In the United States, the pandemic has disproportionately impacted poor and minority communities. Black and Latino communities in the US have had much higher rates of infection and death due to the pandemic. And I believe the same is true for the poorest and most economically disadvantaged people in Chile. It is important to remember that the pandemic has not caused these disparities. They already existed before the pandemic happened. There was already many huge differences between the rich and the poor, and those have only gotten worse over the last few years. One effect of the pandemic that may be new or surprising to you is the impact that it has had on the progress of women. Women have made huge strides in the last decades in the world of education, business, culture, and more. There is much more gender equality now than years ago, even though there's still a lot of work to be done. We are starting to see more women in positions of power. We are starting to see more equality in the home as well. And both of these shifts have made it much easier for women to work. Unfortunately, the pandemic is starting to erase much of the progress that women have made in the professional world in recent years. Because so much of the world is shut down and so many people are being required to work from home, it has become much, much harder for women to both do their professional jobs and take care of the home. So social researchers think that this could cause the progress women have made to regress to where we were 30, 40, or even 50 years ago. This regression will continue, and the problem will get worse if we don't do something about it. These issues of disparities across different populations is not a personal or individual problem. This is a societal and systemic problem. However, it is important to remember that any big problem is also an opportunity. The COVID-19 pandemic has made life very hard for everyone, but it also creates an opportunity for people to come together, to come up with creative solutions, and to put those solutions into action to help everyone around them. When the pandemic was just beginning to take hold in Boston back in March, my colleagues and I found ourselves wanting to help somehow, but we didn't know how we could help. Luckily, we found a group at Harvard Medical School that was bringing together people from academia all across the greater Boston area, companies and startups from the whole region, as well as nonprofit groups. All of these entities came together to help design and manufacture new personal protective equipment for doctors in the Boston area. This included face masks, face shields, and all of the different equipment that is necessary to make sure that we protect doctors and other healthcare workers from the pandemic. And there was a huge delay in manufacturing, and there was not enough to go around. In addition to that, we also researched different methods to clean and sterilize personal protective equipment so that it would last longer. I helped in this effort by coordinating outreach with nonprofit groups that were focused on making sure that all of the research we were doing and all of the products that we were creating didn't just go to the richest hospitals in Boston, but these efforts also made a difference in underprivileged communities, whether that means the suburbs of Boston or communities around the world. We work closely with groups in Mexico, in Haiti, and in Libya. Our group, called the Greater Boston Pandemic Fabrication Team, recognized the importance of proactively seeking to impact underprivileged groups and communities. We recognize that issues of equity are systemic and cut across every single facet of society, from education to business to healthcare. So this problem of inequality needs to be fixed for many reasons. It is not just the job of women or minorities to think about. The problem of equality is not a women's issue. It is a human issue. Every single person, both men and women, minorities, and the majority group, have to come together to solve these problems. So, how do we do that? How do we fix these problems of inequality of different groups, especially as students or as entrepreneurs? First, if you are not surrounded by diverse perspectives, you won't know what problems exist and what solutions to advocate for. So the first thing you have to do is make sure that you are surrounded, whether in your university, in your company, in your startup, by a diverse group of people with many different backgrounds. Second, every single one of us has to keep our eyes open and actively look out for what you can do and how you can lift up people around you that may not be as privileged or as powerful as you are. Become a proactive advocate. Make sure that questions of diversity, equity, and inclusion are included in all of your discussions and in all of your decision-making. Finally, you have to push the people in power around you to make decisions that are centered around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Advocate for policy change in your institutions or in your companies to make sure that they are putting in the extra effort required to make diverse hires. Demand from your bosses or from your board members that they find colleagues and mentors for themselves and for you that are women, that are minorities, and who have different perspectives from those that you are usually surrounded by. You are hoping to solve some of the world's biggest problems using technology and innovation. Just make sure that you are thinking just as deeply about the problem context as you are about the solution. Don't spend all of your time focusing on developing the technology. Equally important is the context of that technology and the impact it will have on society. Thank you so much. That's all I have. It was a pleasure to talk to you. I'm happy to take questions and open up the discussion.
Aditi, muchas gracias. Realmente creemos que tenemos un desafío gigante en la dirección de lo que tú planteas y por eso nos gustaría comenzar con la sección de preguntas y dejo a Angie y a Amanda para proceder con eso.
I think, Angie, you're on mute.
Sí. Ahí sí. También me pasa a mí. Tú mencionaste varias cosas dentro de lo que comentas. Y hay cosas que a mí me gustaría preguntarte. Nosotros tenemos emprendedores del área de la salud, tenemos innovadores, y también tenemos emprendedores que trabajan desde los distintos ámbitos para mejorar industrias, procesos que ya existan a través de la innovación tecnológica. Dentro de las actividades que has desarrollado en los últimos años, te has dedicado a trabajar como directora de los workshops en Latinoamérica y a trabajar con emprendedores. Nosotros en Chile tenemos una base y una potencia con un talento digital increíble. Por eso tenemos actividades como esta. Básicamente, gracias a nuestro director, Lee Ullman, que es uno de nuestros directores en la Fundación, y director para Latinoamérica de la oficina de MIT, hemos podido contar con tu presencia. Pero esto no es común y esto no es algo que nosotros podamos hacer día a día. A tu juicio, ¿qué cosas tenemos que mejorar, tenemos que comenzar a fortalecer para que las organizaciones y la academia, desde el colegio, las habilidades STEM, nosotros en países como Latinoamérica, tenemos que empezar a trabajar?
Waiting for translation.
No te preocupes. ¿Es el retraso?
Hello, Jason.
It's not working?
I'm not sure. Could you translate what Angie said?
If you want, make the team. Okay.
He's asking, can you repeat the question? There was a delay, so he couldn't hear everything that you said.
Me gustaría centrarnos un poco en aquellos aspectos que en tu experiencia crees que son relevantes para que empecemos a trabajar en un ecosistema un poco más unido entre academia, organizaciones, desde las aulas, desde el desarrollo de habilidades STEM con nuestros niños. El emprendimiento, tú trabajaste como directora y has hecho muchos workshops en Latinoamérica para los emprendedores. Pero esto surge por iniciativas que son más bien desde universidades como la tuya. Nosotros aún tenemos mucho que trabajar. Si tuviésemos que volver a reiniciar una creación de alianzas, entre la academia y las organizaciones para que nuestros emprendedores tengan más visibilidad, mejores plataformas, ¿qué elementos crees tú que pueden ser claves o críticos para que comencemos a avanzar y que este ecosistema empiece a ser cada día más robusto, cada día más unido?
Okay.
Estamos esperando que a Aditi le llegue la traducción con un poco de desfase.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the question of how to help businesses and how to improve and support entrepreneurs is a very important one. And I think there's many different ways to do that. So one, I think it's very important to make cross collaborations between many different aspects of society. So something that we did as part of the MIT Global Startup Workshop, which is the entrepreneurship competition that I ran for 4 years at MIT, is we made sure to bring together government, academia, big companies, accelerators, and all different types of people in the area that either work on entrepreneurship and building companies or have the funds to do that. Because it's very, very important to make sure that, one, entrepreneurs are available or are aware of where they can get funding, that they're aware of where they can get mentorship, and that they're aware of where they can find the technological expertise that they need to either build the product that they're working on or to build their company bigger. And so I think creating platforms and creating events and creating places where people can connect is very, very important as a first step. Second, I think it's important to be very thoughtful and purposeful about how those connections happen. So making sure that there are perhaps specific tracks. So if there are groups that are interested in healthcare, making sure that everyone who's interested in healthcare is coming in and speaking together to the same people. So I think overall, collaboration is the key to making sure that small companies and big companies together can come together to help entrepreneurs build these companies and to build the economy overall of the region.
Great, Aditi. I have another question for you. I will speak in English and also in Spanish, okay, for our audience. So, first in Spanish, entonces, ¿cómo te sientes al representar a muchas mujeres haciendo este gran trabajo que has hecho? ¿Y cuáles son los desafíos que has debido enfrentar para llegar a ser parte de un equipo que busca desafiar constantemente los retos siendo bioingeniero? Entonces, in English right now, how do you feel about representing many women doing this great work that you have done? And what are the challenges that you have had to face, to become part of a team that constantly seeks to challenge it and the challenges of being a bioengineer in this area as a woman?
Yeah. So I'll answer the first question first. So I think in terms of being someone who represents women in this space, I think one, it is certainly an honor, and I'm really glad that I can speak as a woman in engineering. But at the same time, I think we need to shift the perspective a little bit and say, you know, I am a bioengineer. The fact that I'm a woman is separate, right? Like any man who is a bioengineer would just be called a bioengineer. And so we have to really be able to shift the way we think and say, I'm just a person who's doing this thing, whether engineering, entrepreneurship, a professor, or whatever. And so I think it's a lot of pressure to put on a person to say, you know, you are a female bioengineer. How do you feel representing that whole group? Because we can't represent that whole group. I am only one woman in engineering, and different women in engineering have very different ideas and perspectives and experiences. And so I think it's very important to hear from those different perspectives. So I hope that, you know, my perspective is valuable, and that my perspective can help inform other people. But it's equally as important to talk to other women in engineering and other women in entrepreneurship to get their perspective as well, because it can be very, very different. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second question?
Great, I think you are listening to me. My second question for you is the challenge that you have had to face to become part of a team, né, that constantly seeks to challenge you and being a bioengineer. So in Spanish, just to los desafíos que tiene como para ser parte, né, de un gran equipo que busca desafiar y ser bioingeniero.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different challenges that I have to face. I think one of them, specifically being a woman in engineering, I think is that I have to work harder to get people to take me seriously. I have to be over-prepared for anything, for any meeting, for any project. I have to be fully prepared and know the answers to all the questions, because if I don't, then, you know, it goes back to, if I am the representative of all women in engineering, that's a lot of pressure. And so because of that, I think I and many women in engineering and technology feel this way, is that we have to always put our best foot forward. We always have to know what we're doing, or at least look like we know what we're doing. And that's hard. You know, you can't always know what you're doing. You can't always have all the answers, because engineering and any type of work in general is a learning experience, right? Like, I am a student in medical engineering, and the whole point of this is for me to learn how to do this, learn what the problems are, and then come up with creative solutions. And so I think it's very important that when we're working in a collaborative group, that we don't think, you know, this is a woman, she has to know everything. And if she doesn't, that means women cannot do engineering, or women cannot do math, or whatever. And so I think that is probably the biggest challenge that I faced, is feeling this pressure to always be perfect. And I think that's something that I have learned to deal with and become better about over the last 5 years. In my experience at MIT, I've become much better at being able to communicate and explain, like, I don't know the answer to that, but that's okay, because we are here to work together, and we are here to figure out the solution together.
Very good, very challenging. And Aditi, hablemos un poco del rol de las organizaciones en este ámbito. ¿Cuál es tu opinión en el rol que poseen las organizaciones en fomentar el ecosistema de la innovación y el emprendimiento en ámbitos que el tuyo, donde se requieren grandes alianzas para dar abertura a este tipo de iniciativas? ¿Sí? I will try to translate my question. So I would like let's talk a bit about the role of the organizations in this area. What is, in your opinion, the role that organizations have in promoting the ecosystem of innovation, entrepreneurship in areas like yours, now your job, you're doing your actuation, and where large alliances are required to open up this type of initiative?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and there's a multifaceted answer. So I think I'll talk a little bit about 3 or 4 specific groups that I think need to be a part of this alliance to promote entrepreneurship. So 1, I think the government needs to be involved. 2, I think academia needs to be involved, so universities in the region. And 3, I think big companies and small companies together have to be involved. So I'll talk about each of those one by one. So I think the role of companies is they have a lot of expertise in taking a product or taking an idea and turning it into a product, turning it into something that can be sold, that can have a real impact. So whether that's a medical device, whether that's an app, or something else, they have the expertise to understand what the market looks like and what is the best way to move forward from an operational perspective, from a marketing perspective, and from a business perspective. So I think those groups have to come together to provide that specific expertise. I think universities have to be involved because universities have a very strong foundation and ability to ask big scientific questions. And so I think technology development and the ability to make new solutions, whether, again, medical or other types of engineering solutions, can come from universities and academia. They are very, very good at asking big questions. They are very good at taking information from multiple sources and bringing it together in ways that are new and that are novel. And that can allow for really exciting new solutions to society's biggest problems. Universities are where the best medical technologies were built. But they would not have become impactful in society if it wasn't for businesses and companies. And so those two have to come together. And then I think the government is equally important. The government has to provide policies and support both of these activities. So the government needs to be able to provide funding to encourage research into new technologies, because we don't know whether that research is going to turn into something that can be sold. And so the government has to take some of that risk of providing funding because we don't know where that technology is going to go and where that research is going to go. And at the same time, the government needs to be able to bring together these different groups as well, because universities and companies may have different incentives. And so it is, I think, the government's job to bring together these incentives and make it such that these technologies can be implemented in society in a way that is useful and impactful.
Great. Aditi, tú has hablado también de ser una mujer en un mundo tecnológico y de innovación, claro. Entonces, cuéntanos cuál tu visión del rol de las mujeres en nuestro ámbito de trabajo. ¿Qué opinas de nuestro liderazgo? ¿Qué debemos empujar? ¿Sí? Entonces, when you talk about women in a world of technology, in a woman in an innovation world, tell us your vision of the role of women in our field of work, and what do you think of our leadership? What should we push?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should be pushing and leading in all fronts. So anything that a man is leading, we should be able to do the same thing. And so I think, as a woman, it's not that we should, like I said in my speech, these issues of gender equality are not women's issues, they are human issues. And so, yes, there are women that are going to push to bring more women into leadership roles. There are women that are going to push to pay more attention to women's health, or other things that are related specifically to women. But at the same time, there are women that have different interests. There may be women that are interested in cybersecurity, or something completely different that isn't necessarily related to a woman or a woman's issue, and they should have the opportunity to be able to work in that space as well. And so my vision is really that one day there is no difference. We don't speak of me as a female bioengineer, we speak of me as a bioengineer. We don't speak of, a woman athlete or a woman doctor or a woman scientist. They are doctors, they are scientists, they are athletes, and they are the same as any man. And they have the same opportunities as any man. So yeah.
Aditi, vámonos un poco a lo que tú haces. Hoy ha quedado en evidencia con nuestra actual realidad el rol activo que tiene la tecnología y la innovación en la búsqueda de nuevas soluciones. En lo posible que nos van a permitir retomar la continuidad de nuestras vidas. ¿Cuál crees tú que será el legado de la innovación y de la tecnología post-pandemia?
Did you get that, Jason? Oh, I think Jason did not get that. Could we ask the question again? Okay. Angie, could you ask that question again? I think Jason didn't get it, so he can't translate it.
I can help you. So I think the question that Angie is asking in Spanish is with this reality, this current reality we are living, the active role that technology and innovation have in the search for new solutions that allow us to continue with our lives as far as possible has become evident. So what do you think the legacy of post-pandemic technology and innovation will be?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the pandemic has really made clear a lot of problems in society, but I think, like I said, it also has provided a lot of opportunity. So, for example, the group that I mentioned, the Greater Boston Pandemic Fabrication Team, has really created new types of personal protective equipment that are easy to manufacture. And the same is true in many different spaces. I think the pandemic has provided opportunities, and people have taken advantage of these opportunities to design and manufacture technologies that are accessible, which I think is the most important thing. So, oftentimes the newest, coolest technologies are expensive and they're exciting and they are accessible to, universities and companies that have the money to be able to buy them or build them. But that is not accessible to the whole population. There are many people that do not have access to these technologies. And that is true for my research as well. I think exoskeletons are cool and they're very exciting and they have a lot of potential for impact. But we need to make sure that we are designing these technologies in a way that they become accessible to the most underprivileged in our society. And so I think the pandemic has provided a lot of opportunity and need to do that, because the virus and the pandemic doesn't only affect people at universities and companies, it affects every single person. And so it's made clear a need to provide greater accessibility. And so I think we're moving in that direction. I think we're very much moving in a direction where technology and innovation is now not just about the cool new thing that, we're doing research at MIT and at Harvard and these other places, but it's pushing technology and engineering in a direction that says, okay, we have these amazing ideas, we have these amazing technologies, how can we put them to use and how can we implement them so that they do the greatest good for the greatest number of people? And so I think and I hope that will be the legacy of the pandemic in making technology and solutions to society's biggest problems accessible to everyone.
Amanda, vamos a ir juntas porque el delay de Jason le está llegando mal a Aditi. Vamos a hacer participar a alguno de nuestros emprendedores. ¿Te parece? Hay varios de nuestros emprendedores que nos están preguntando respecto al liderazgo, si es que se necesita algún liderazgo social para poder hacer este cambio. ¿Qué opinas tú?
Aditi, about the leadership in the social camp, what do you think? What is your opinion about this?
About what, I'm sorry?
The leadership in the social part, in the social team.
Yeah. I think that, for me, is the most important thing. I think, we live in a society, we cannot live by ourselves. We are not a one person or one group. We are an entire community. And so I think anything that we do and anything that we work towards should be targeted towards and impact the world. And so I think, you know, leadership to me means that you have a vision of the world and what the world should look like, and you put in the energy and the effort to make the world that you hope to see real. And for me, I think my vision of the world is very much a world that is more equitable and is, you know, equal across all different types of people. And so I hope to work towards that goal. You know, I think everyone has their own vision for the world. Everyone has their own interests and goals and ambitions. And that's great. And we need people that are working on all sorts of things. You know, we need people working on medicine. We need people working on security. We need people working on economics and all of these different societal issues. But I think as long as whatever your goal is and whatever your ambition is, as long as you approach it from a perspective of, you know, social good and making sure that you're doing it for the good of yourself, but also the good of your fellow people, I think that is all we need.
Aditi, I have the impression that this new environment is fostering collaboration in opposition to competition, so that we are coming into a world that might be much better in the sense that people collaborate more than compete. What is your view about that?
I think that's a really great vision, actually. You know, I think, you know, competition is important. It helps us to become better and improve all the time. But I think competition can only go so far. You know, I think, like I said before, having diverse perspectives on your team is more effective. Businesses with diverse perspectives make more money. Businesses with a diverse have more impact. And the only way to do that is through collaboration. You know, we cannot build a business as a one-person team. We cannot build a university. We cannot do research with a one-person team. My exoskeleton research took a team of 7-8 people. And so, you know, there is a place for competition. There is a place to provide incentives to help people improve and really think deeply about the questions and the problems and solutions that they're working towards. But in the end, it is when we come together and collaborate that I think we have the most sustainable and most effective solutions.
Amanda, ¿vamos con las últimas preguntas? Estás en silencio, ahí sí. Vamos con las últimas preguntas.
Last question, sí.
Las últimas. Una de las preguntas que nos hacen constantemente es respecto a la actitud desde la academia, la actitud en el fondo desde la universidad, la actitud como la tuya, que partió desde la Universidad de Santiago, desde muchas cosas que ha ido haciendo. ¿Cómo tenemos que fomentar nosotros en Latinoamérica o en Chile el emprendimiento con base tecnológica más allá de las aulas, a tu juicio?
Sí, Aditi, so how can we how can we foment more this entrepreneurship, and also do you think that from the academic college, university promotes technology-based entrepreneurship beyond the classrooms?
How can we do that?
Yeah.
Question? Okay. That's a very good question. And I think that's a question that we're all trying to answer. I don't know that I have an answer. I think this is something that we have to keep trying towards. So there are examples, for example, you know, MIT plans different hackathons to bring communities together. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I think that's a very hard question. I think the first thing that universities can do is to provide practical experience. So oftentimes, I think when students are working in classrooms and doing projects, you know, it almost doesn't feel real sometimes. It's in this small, you know, enclosed classroom setting, which is a good place to learn new skills and new techniques, but it's not necessarily translatable to the real world. So I think maybe requiring things like internships, requiring that people or students work at companies to get real practical experience as a part of the curriculum is one way to promote entrepreneurship and to promote translation of knowledge and engineering and technology into the real world setting. And, you know, whether it's internships at companies or maybe working in the government or working in an accelerator or something like that, I think that practical experience is the most important thing. So, you know, if there are students watching right now, I would say take some time and find that practical experience, you know, over a summer or over a semester. Go and do something outside of school, because that is extremely important in understanding how not just school learning, but how real world settings and technology work. But that's just one thought. I think there's many other ways to do it.
Vamos con la pregunta de Guillermo Montúfar que nos ha hecho, ¿te parece? Dice, where's your vision about the collaboration solution as crowdsource in order to get more inclusive and sustainable product to the society?
I think my vision to be more inclusive is really making sure that we are thinking actively all the time about diversity. So it's not enough to say, you know, we've hired one woman or we've hired one minority. It's thinking all the time about how is my product, my solution going to impact different types of people? How is it going to impact women? How is it going to impact minorities? How is it going to impact people that are poor, people that are rich? And how can I work? And how can I design the solution in a way that is human-centric? So, you know, I think a lot of the time people focus on the technology and the design of the solution and the engineering. And that is important. It's important to make sure that your device or your product works. But equally important is how people interact with it. So, you know, my work is focused on human exoskeleton interaction on a physical and cognitive level. And I think that is equally important for any type of device and any type of solution, is you have to think all the time about how people are going to use your system or your device, how it's going to impact their lives, and what can you do to make sure that your device, your product, your company is being accessible to as many of those people as possible.
Pedro Pablo, ¿te parece que hagamos la última pregunta en virtud del tiempo y ser puntuales?
Me parece. Aditi, what would you say to our Latin American entrepreneurs? ¿Qué le dirías a nuestros entrepreneurs, a nuestros emprendedores latinoamericanos?
I would say, you know, find what you're excited to work on. Find the problem that you think is important, and find the technology and the solution that you think will work, and put in the effort to figure out how those two come together. You know, the problem is the most important thing, and the humans that are involved in that problem are the next most important thing. Bring those together and think about how can you solve that problem in the most effective way possible.
Aditi, for us, it's a pleasure to have you with us. We would like to invite you to come to Brazil or to Chile as soon as we are over with this pandemic. We really would like to have your views in helping us promoting for minorities, all types, and making diverse the society in general in Chile. In Brazil, it's less so, but it's also a challenge. It's not diverse in terms of entrepreneurs. So we would like to have a push and show that how this is very good for the society. Aditi, te queremos agradecer. Nosotros te dejamos invitada para Brasil o para Chile cuando puedas venir, cuando esta pandemia termine, porque a nosotros nos importa mucho poder promover la diversidad. Nos parece que la experiencia en Brasil es un poco mejor, pero en Chile tenemos un gran desafío de ser capaces de que el emprendimiento sea diverso y que las personas entiendan que las distintas visiones ayudan a construir un mundo mejor. Y por eso quiero agradecer también a todos nuestros sponsors en este seminario, mucho desde la Fundación Everis en todo el mundo, impulsar con fuerza la tecnología. Creemos que es el camino que nos va a ayudar a resolver muchos problemas, pero esa tecnología tiene que estar en manos de los que hoy día le están poniendo menos foco. Por eso la Fundación impulsa a los niños, a las mujeres, a los emprendedores, a un mundo diverso, de modo de asegurarnos de que todos podamos acceder y tengamos más oportunidades. Aditi, thank you very much for being with us. It has been a real pleasure, and as I said, we hope to have you here in South America very soon. Gracias.
Thank you very much, and I hope to come as soon as I can.
Yes, Aditi, thank you so much. I really admire your work, and it was a pleasure to be with you today. Eu admiro mucho tu trabajo y fue un placer estar hoy con ustedes. Muchas gracias.
Oye, y para cerrar, yo quiero agradecer nuevamente a la oficina de MIT en Latinoamérica que nos dio la posibilidad de contar tu presencia, y con la presencia del profesor Niven Nahamura, que vamos a tener en la ceremonia del 12 de noviembre para el cierre de las ceremonias del Premio Actitud, con algunos de nuestros jurados, que va a estar el Country Manager de Google para Perú y Chile, Edgardo Frías, Oliver Frogel de Scale Capital, Pablo Traub, Felipe Bunster de Mutual de Seguridad y varios jurados más. Por lo tanto, los dejamos a todos invitados de que se unan a la transmisión el 12 de noviembre a las 4 de la tarde. Vamos a comenzar, el profesor nos va a hablar, nosotros vamos a tener un seminario con él va a hablar durante 1 hora respecto a su trabajo en innovación, y posteriormente a eso nosotros vamos a proceder con la premiación. Así es que nuevamente, gracias por eso y gracias a todos los que han participado, gracias por sus preguntas, han sido increíbles. Tenemos a mucha gente contenta y agradeciéndonos tu presencia. Así es que tengan un muy buen día, los vemos el 12 de noviembre.